Okay, so we've heard this morning a fair bit about omni-channel, yesterday, customer experience. Does everyone have a mic? But one other pillar that's all tied up. Can I get some? You're up. Can I get one more mic, please? One other pillar that's tied up in that is personalisation. And we heard from Lynn Robb earlier this morning as well, talking about when they do personalise their content, even at a doctor level, the engagement just goes through the roof. So we've got three experts with us on stage this morning who are all going to help us learn a little bit more about what personalisation in pharma is, what it isn't, and how to perhaps do it a little bit better to provide that optimised customer experience. So very quickly, the experts joining me on panel, my good friend Darren Woodhouse from iNova, Marketing Director Manager there. We've got Simon from Pfizer, who's the comms lead, and we've also got, pretty new to the country, Michael Kirby, who's the country lead at Medscape, who have now realised how important Australia is, and they've set up a shop and sent their brightest over here to help support us all over here. So welcome, gentlemen, and let's begin. So, personalisation, pharma, it's dare I say, a buzzword. We've all realised the importance of it and the impact you get. But if we're honest, I mean, most of the personalisation efforts that pharma does could really go to any doctor that I've seen. Maybe there's some isolated examples. So today's challenge is, how do we make it truly meaningful at a granular level, but at scale, without becoming impossible? So it's a little bit of a paradox and a conundrum, to use a word that was quite popular yesterday. What we want to do first is take the temperature of the room on this one, if that's okay. To get the phones out, we'll get a Slido up there. And when we think about the personalisation in pharma, what's the first word that comes to mind? You know, complexity, scalable, hopeless, impossible, things like that. Stigma. Whoa. I keep forgetting we've got them down here. You don't have to break your neck. Segmentation. Wrong with that. Okay. Difficult. Is difficult an understatement? Right, yeah, well, we've got a, thank you very much, everybody, for getting in there. Looks like difficult has come up top of the list, and yeah, I'd say that's an understatement, even based on what we've been discussing recently. So let's dive into the conversation. If we all strip away the jargon and the buzzword bingo, what should personalisation mean in pharma? Darren, what do you think?
I think it's a really interesting one, because, I mean, even if you look at company portals and our websites, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on these things, with the hope that doctors flock to them each morning, check what's new. They like Instagram, they go to that. Really, from a personalisation perspective, we've often built that on a little bit of market research. Maybe 10, 20, 30 doctors. We've done some ad boards which really have shaped some of those insights. That kind of creates a predictive journey for that customer. It's all reliant upon more customers starting to use those websites and really starting to create a picture and a journey for those customers. But unlike Netflix, where your experience and your use drives that, but equally so do your friends, because they make a suggestion. Your kids hop on your Netflix account and suddenly you're a fan of K-pop Demon Hunters, Gilmore Girls for my 13-year-old. That starts to kind of shape that experience. But the reality is we spend so much money on these sorts of resources, but it is a relatively impersonal journey, and I think that's the challenge we have, is how do we find something that's relevant, that's segmented to our customers, but equally, we have to invest in driving more content there so that it is meaningful, it's relevant, it's up to date. That's also expensive though, because you often have to steal each of those funds from each of the brands to fund that corporate site, and ultimately, we rely on the customer using it, but also capturing their preference at the beginning of that journey as well. So
it's important part you to capturing their preferences and their use, and that leads on to Philippe's words this morning around about measuring the data and leveraging that to iterate what you're doing. Simon, is it about the message? Is it the channel, the choice in terms of the preferences, or is it the timing? Do you have any wisdom on that one?
Sure. Well, first I'd like to thank you for pointing out that my LinkedIn photo is pretty old. But anyway, we'll move over that.
Sure, it's like looking into a mirror.
To your question, I think as
I wouldn't swipe left.
as it is. Anyway, getting back on topic. As Darren mentioned, there are other industries that are way ahead of us, like Netflix, Amazon. They are able to capture vast amounts of data on all aspects of our life, from preferences and what we've purchased, how we engage in their sites. And so they're able to really personalize the experience that they serve up to us and predict what we might be interested in. The gap for us in pharma, we're way behind. We don't have that opportunity or that central focus to access that level of detail holistically, and that's where we fall down. What we do is a very fragmented approach. Each company has their own website with medical information on there and doctors, and I think that's a cost of entry, to be honest. I don't think we should be moving away from that, but that's a cost of entry. We shouldn't be investing in elaborate customer journeys, and because as Darren said, doctors don't jump up and go, oh, now I must jump onto that Pfizer site and see what's new. They are really looking for that basic information. What they do value is peer-to-peer interaction. They value third-party trusted platforms. And so we need to be thinking differently. Maybe we should, as an industry, be working together with third-party platforms, with Medicines Australia, providing a centralized repository for medicine information, events information. Then we could collect that more holistic view of preferences, personas, all of that, so we can serve up a more meaningful...
Such an important point, and one that I hear discussed at conferences in basically every market. The barrier or the resistance and the feedback that comes back sometimes is, oh, we can't do a big centralised thing because we can't measure the data as well, or we can't get that feedback, and it's just bamboozles my mind. So you, at the expense of instead of providing a good customer experience, you prefer to provide a bad one that you can measure. It's like it's a real melon scratcher. Michael, you've got a lot of experience in this space when it comes. The conversation is leading to the third-party platforms. Can I get you to react to how you believe HCPs behave on third-party platforms in comparison to the pharma hubs that we're speaking about now?
Yeah, so I think the main difference that obviously we have as a third-party platform is the level of content that we have versus a kind of pharma-owned site. So we can provide a HCP with the ability to navigate across therapy areas, conditions, source information that they're seeking. And I suppose this allows for a HCP to find all that they're looking for in one place, so they don't have to visit multiple sites. But what that does for us from, I suppose, an editorial perspective is we put that HCP in the driving seat, so we can then personalise their content in line with their behaviours. It provides them a user experience that is relevant and it's impactful. And from my role and what we do is then we use that insights to in kind of inform your campaigns, so that how you can then reach those HCPs. So things like behaviour-based targeting, next best action, how are you going to kind of drive engagement after viewing content. But having said that, we do see still common trends across lots of specialties. So HCPs do like to engage with clinical commentary. They like clinical summaries. So it's kind of thinking of that, of how do you maybe bring that content to light and to the forefront in all of your communication.
Yep, no, it makes sense. So personalisation, went down there at the bottom, it said difficult. I'm going to refer again to Lynn Robb's example before. At a doctor level, it's very, very impactful, and we'd love to tailor every message to every doctor on those merits, but it's not realistic, it's not scalable. How do you find that balance between what's ideal and what's actually doable? Anyone?
Yeah, I can take that. I think we've talked about the challenges with data, but that's not the only problem. Other challenges are internal silos. I'm sure we've all worked in organizations where different brand teams work very independently of each other, medical teams work independently of commercial. I think we need to shift the balance from product-centric to audience-centric. So we are much more focused on what the customer wants. We need to have a consistent view on the needs of the customer and then develop more coordinated journeys with these cross-functional or cross-company internal stakeholders. And then with each step in that journey, we're using the insights from previous experiences to determine what would be the next best action. So we're adding greater value. So sure, we're not at the next Netflix level, but at least we're personalizing things and not bombarding the customer with things they don't need.
I was going to say, to add to that, I think finding those customers that are those early adopters. I mean, we heard from Arthur yesterday in terms of some of the tools that he's already using, the AI bots that he's created to review medical information, speed up the promo cycle. I think equally we've got customers who are on that side, whether or not they're educating their patients via Instagram, via video education. That is purely AI. It's all video generated of them using an AI tool, or they're transcribing the patient consultation with a video attached to it, which closes that gap in terms of that medical literacy. It completes the cycle for them. It pulls in patient information. So as an industry, we need to be able to support those clinicians by providing our patient resources and our starting guides to help that clinician plug into that and complete that for a more complete patient consultation.
That's really interesting. And also, does that come down to a persona and a segmentation type of play? Like I saw Philip's fascinating presentation this morning with the impact of email and the bombardment of email on open rates and annoyance maybe. But are Gen Zs maybe more open to engaging with these sorts of solutions that's going to help their practice a little bit more digitally, or is it more holistic than that?
I'd probably say that's a misconception. I think some of the early adopters are really just more innovative. They want to give a better patient experience. They're not necessarily the younger clinician, but they are driving some of that adoption. And it's very quickly, as we've seen, even from an AI adoption curve, they're very quickly becoming commonplace tools to give a better patient experience in terms of what they start on.
We touched on the words next best action just before, and again, that's if you've got a buzzword bingo card, that's on there somewhere. But Michael, I'd like to refer to you in terms of do you have like a real world example of best practice in terms of a next best action initiative?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of elements to that. So I think with any campaign, we were talking before, and there is still the rule of the 7 kind of points of engagement for changing behaviour, but then maybe looking to segment off the back of that. So segment off, personalise off the back of that to kind of then personalise it for a group that is actively engaged. I mean, we've run many campaigns where there's a kind of core baseline of promotion and awareness, but then giving someone an opportunity to accelerate through content, to engage with one piece and then be quite quick to be able to move on to the next. And that's where I think everyone here can kind of do that and adopt that with the content and the assets that they have. Yeah.
Yeah, nice one. So it all means nothing if we're not measuring it. Are we making a difference? So how do we actually know if a personalisation approach is working? What metrics can we use that go beyond just the open rates and clicks?
Do you want me to take that? Okay.
You too.
So I think we need to redefine success. And I think it's really about relevance over reach. And I think in order to achieve that and really understand what customers value, the key is co-creation. So working with the internal stakeholders, working with HCPs and patients to really understand what they value, where they want to get the information and how they want to get the information. Because I think Once we can do that, we are then engaging them in a much more meaningful way. And I think the real indicator that we've done it well is if we move from a push model to a pull model. If they're proactively reaching out for us and then re-engaging with us, we're obviously adding value. And so I think that's a great indicator that we're doing a good job in adding value to them.
I was going to say, I just love the idea of that kind of personalised patient aid. So being able to provide our clinicians with almost the editable documents of our patient resources, our initiation guides, etc., and being able for them to put that to the patient that's actually truly tailored to that patient in front of them, I think is, you know, the nirvana of resources, because it's then valued, it's used, it's given to the patient. It's all well and good to spend all this money on our corporate sites and have all our materials there, but if no one goes and we're just trying to measure clicks and open rates, it's a bit disingenuous.
Yeah, the term relevance over reach is one that springs to mind. Okay, what we kind of wanted to do is put you guys under the pump a little bit and talk about just maybe a one or two sentences each that you can, some wisdom that you can impart to the crowd here about what they can take away tomorrow to help improve their personalisation at their organisation, or be better informed in a conversation to contribute it. So in a paragraph or sentence, or as astute and concise as you can, what's the single most important step Pharma can take away to make their communications more meaningful for HCPs?
I personally love that co-creation. I think working with your clinicians, but your patients. We heard from the oncology nurses yesterday in terms of how much value that they can give to the patient. They've got more time, but spending kind of that time and effort as an industry to co-create those resources and materials for patients is inevitably going to result in a greater relationship for the patient at the end of the day with their clinician, but also us with them.
Yeah, and I think having the audience focus versus a brand focus, which requires some internal coordination and also some permission and guidance from the top that this is the culture and this is how we're going to address things, and each person having an equal voice, so you're not force-fitting a behaviour based on the KPIs that are being pushed down, but actually really driving the right behaviours.
Michael, we might leave the last words to the most experienced person in personalisation in the room, arguably.
Yeah, sure. So I would my big take home would be to provide multiple entry points into a campaign. So consider that all HCPs, they're all individuals, as we all are. So they all have different preferences. So on what types of content they want to engage with. I would encourage everyone to implement the data a third-party platform holds. Evolve your communication, and I think Philip referenced it perfectly this morning. Can it evolve away from just emails and display media as the only way that you can reach them? And something that we like to ask everyone is, what do you want your HCP to think, feel, and do? And finally, that they kindly indulge me, is to come and fish where the fishes are. So, yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. We do have a couple of minutes left. We've been pretty concise this morning. Does anybody have any thoughts of their own in terms of how to improve personalisation, or some initiatives that's worked well for them, or a question for the experts while we're here, while we've got them? We've got Julia Walsh over there behind you, Maddie.
Thank you, Matt.
Hey, Julia.
Hi. One of my passions is understanding the behaviour of healthcare professionals online as they search for information about prescription products. And I think that's where we have a really big opportunity to personalise, because in that moment they've been triggered to search, they've got the patient in front of them, as opposed to when an email comes to them outside of time. So what are your thoughts on that, and opportunities to turn that online interaction into offline engagement by switching it into a quick email to the company or into a chatbot or something like that, where also they might not feel like they're going to be tracked, because I think that's one of the things that pushes them away from engaging in your corporate sites.
I was going to say, I think the real challenge in that space historically has been often where they want to have that conversation is beyond our label. And so our own internal compliance challenges then kind of make that a little bit more of a difficult conversation. So it ends up not being a quick conversation. It's who's going to respond to this and how we're going to respond to it, given it's probably off-label, probably kind of beyond what our indication is.
Would
So
you
I
just
think
do what Sumi suggested and apologise up front to your compliance team and run the gauntlet? That's all we've got time for. The real benefit of these sessions, guys, is if somebody says something that triggers a thought or you'd like to know more, please connect with them on LinkedIn. We're building a community here, and everybody's more than happy to share their wisdom and thoughts. Michael, Simon, Darren, thank you very much, and